you buy that backpack at a flea market, or are you just pretending to be military? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. That bag had crossed deserts most people couldn't even pronounce. Laughter echoed. Cameras rolled. They stopped her from boarding just because her bag looked too military. Then someone stepped forward, and everything changed. Before we dive in, where are you listening from right now? What's your story? Drop it in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Tucson International Airport, 6:37 a.m. The terminal buzzed with the slow hum of morning travelers, fileys juggling strollers, business people rushing in polished shoes, the soft rattle of suitcase wheels echoing off polished floors. Elena Vasquez stood alone in the security line, her boots planted solid on the tile, one step behind a woman in sandals who kept checking her phone and sighing. The line shifted forward. Elena adjusted the weight of the military green backpack slung over her shoulder. The canvas was faded and worn, edges fraying, but she kept it spotless, each zipper working clean, each strap trimmed to function. The patch on the side had once been a proud red and gold 308th Supply Battalion. Now it was dulled, nearly colorless, but it was stitched on by her own hand. Back in '91, and it had never come off. She didn't wear anything that marked her as military. No cap, no insignia. Her hair, streaked with gray, was pulled into a tight braid that brushed the top of her collar. Her posture, straight, balanced, motionless, was the only real giveaway. That and her eyes, focused, cautious, alert. She hadn't flown in years, hadn't left Arizona since her retirement. Today was an exception. She had a one-way ticket to Minneapolis. Her son, Anthony, had sent a short message 3 days ago. If you still want to visit. I think it's time. That was it. No punctuation, no warmth. But she booked the ticket within the hour. She hadn't told him she was coming. She hadn't even replied. It felt easier to just show up, for once, instead of second-guessing every word she might say. As the line moved forward, she exhaled slowly. Her right hand brushed the top of her backpack, just briefly, checking the zipper. Inside was her only real possession of value, a leather-bound field notebook, thick with pages written in sand-blurred pen, coordinates, shipment logs, handwritten tallies, nests. Some crossed out, some circled. It wasn't a journal in the sentimental sense. It was a record, a proof of life for people the world had forgotten. She never opened it for anyone, not even Anthony. A voice snapped her out of her thought. Next, she stepped forward, placed her boots into the tray, followed by her belt and watch. Then she placed the backpack onto the conveyor. A young TSA officer stood at the scanner, arms crossed. His knee tag read D. Myers. He couldn't have been older than 25. Blonde, hair shaved high and tight, sleeves rolled up past regulation. He scanned Elena up and down, then looked at the bag. He didn't smile. "Is this your bag, Ma?" he asked, already pulling it aside. "It is." He motioned her toward a secondary table without further explanation. Elena followed, silently. It wasn't the first time someone looked at her bag and assumed things, but this already had a different air, performative, public. Myers unzipped the top with a firm tug. "Military-style backpack," he muttered. "We get a lot of these lately." He reached in without asking, flipping through a hoodie, a bottle of pain relievers, a spare phone charger. Then his hand landed on the notebook. "What's this?" he said, pulling it out. The leather made a soft creak. Elena took a breath. "That's personal." Myers opened it anyway. The first few pages were old supply manifests written in shorthand, codes only she would still recognize. "You write this stuff, or is it like part of the costume?" She looked at him. "Excuse me." He flipped a few more pages and chuckled under his breath. "I mean, come on, you buy this at a flea market or something? Looks like a prop from a bad war movie." Elena said nothing. She just stared at the book in his hands. The sea hands that had picked up crushed MRE boxes in the Iraqi sun. The sea hands that once pulled a field medic off a wounded corporal, carried him across burning sand, and returned before her own convoy was out of radio range. That notebook had been clutched in her lap while she radioed for medevac, while she wrote down which bodies were recovered and which were not, and now it was being held like it was cosplay material. Another TSA officer walked past, glancing at the scene. Myers held up the notebook like a joke. "Check this out," he whispered, loud enough for others to hear. "Old school RPG material right here." Behind them, the line slowed. Someone coughed, annoyed. A man in a blazer muttered, "What's the holdup?" That's when the phone went up. A woman in sunglasses, too stylish for 6:45 a.m., turned her phone to selfie mode. "Hey, F," she said, grinning. "You won't believe this. We've got some serious stolen valor vibes at Tucson today. Woman thinks she's G.I. Jane." Elena turned slightly and saw her face on the phone screen. The woman flipped the Sarah around and zoomed in on the backpack. "Check it out. She's got a whole war journal or something. Hashtag airport cosplay." From further back, a group of teens snickered. One of them pulled out his own phone and whispered, "Get the patch. Bro, look at that patch." Elena didn't move. Her hands were steady, but her jaw clenched. She wasn't new to ridicule, but this was the first time she felt exposed, recorded, misrepresented. Her own face was being turned into a meme before her eyes. The woman with the phone, Carla, her tag read, "Kept filming." "This is goal," she said. "Maybe she'll salute someone next." Someone in line shouted, "Can we move this along?" A mother 2 spots behind Elena gripped her toddler's hand and murmured, "Don't look, sweetie. She might be off." Elena stared at Myers. He was still flipping through the notebook like it was a joke. Her voice dropped to something cold and low. "Be careful with that." He glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "It's just paper." Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Just paper. Like nests weren't written in blood and dust in those pages. Like a list of rations delivered to an overrun forward operating base in 91 wasn't the reason 6 medics survived that month. Like Reyes Nyo, circled in black ink on page 46, wasn't the only marker she had left of the man who died 2 feet from her trying to patch a child's shattered leg. "It's just paper," he repeated, then tossed it onto the table with a careless flick of his wrist. She looked at it lying there. For a moment, it didn't feel like a notebook. It felt like a body, discarded. She didn't say a word. Not to Myers, not to Carla, not to the crowd that was already turning her life into spectacle. She simply reached forward, picked it up with both hands, and held it close to her chest. Inside, she could hear her own voice repeating a single thought, steady and dull. "I've survived artillery fire." But I wasn't prepared for this. Dylan Myers didn't hand the notebook back. Instead, he slid it toward his elbow, right next to Elena's military ID, then picked up his radio with a lazy thumb. "Need a supervisor at secondary 2, he said, eyes still locked on her face. "Possible falsified credentials?" Elena blinked. The words didn't sting, but they felt familiar, like something she'd heard before. In a different office, under different fluorescent lights. He clicked the radio off and said louder, "You can wait right here. Don't touch anything." The room wasn't loud, but the silence shifted. Travelers in the security queue shuffled with impatience. The conveyor belt beeped softly in the background. Someone's phone chimed with a calendar alert, then to the boarding announcement over the intercom flight 317 to Minneapolis. Final boarding call. Elena's heart thudded once. It wasn't panic. Exactly. But she'd learned long ago how many things could go wrong in the last 10 minutes of a mission. She spoke calmly. "I need to make that flight. You have my ID. The bag is cleared. There's no reason to hold me." Dylan leaned an elbow on the table, still looking smug. "If you were a real vet, wouldn't you have a government-issued pass? Something with a chip. This." He flicked the edge of her ID. "Looks printed." Her jaw tightened. That's a valid VA card. Well, he muttered. I guess anybody can lineate these days. To the side, Carla's phone was still up. Yep, she said, speaking into it. She's still here arguing. I think she's serious, y'all. Like she actually believes she's military. This is wild. From behind, a man's voice pierced the tension. Are you kidding me? Elena turned slightly. The speaker wore a dark blazer and a Bluetooth headset. Middle-aged, face flushed. I've got a 9 a.m. in Chicago, he barked. And I've been in this line for 20 DN minutes while you guys play dress-up. I'm not playing anything, Elena said quietly, not looking at him. The man waved a hand dismissively. Yeah, sure. Just get her out of here or move the line, a teenage girl whispered behind him, not trying to be discreet. She looks like she wandered in from the bus station. Someone else chuckled. Elena's fingers curled around the edge of the table, not clenched, just steady, grounded. She looked down at the notebook, still sitting under Dylan's elbow. Her eyes landed on the corner of the pages, where the edge of a dried blossom peeked out a desert marigold, pressed flat between paper, long forgotten until now. It had once grown beside a fuel depot near the Euphrates. She'd picked it on a morning when the convoy had been delayed due to a sandstorm. Reyes had laughed and told her it wouldn't last a week. You'll smush it in that ugly book of yours, he'd said, grinning. Dead flower for a dead war? She'd smirked back. Better than forgetting it ever happened. Later that sea week, under low moonlight and a power outage, she'd written his knee in the notebook. Reyes had been hit while delivering gauze packs to a mobile triage tent. She'd found him minutes later bleeding, cold, still conscious. If I don't make it, he had whispered, don't let them wipe me out of the record. Just leave me in that thing. I don't want to disappear, she had promised, then watched him fade. And now, decades later, that C page was sitting on a folding table in a domestic airport, beneath the elbow of a kid who thought it was cosplay. Elena felt something in her chest shift. Not break, but twist. She glanced toward the gate. Final boarding call. Again. Ma, Dylan said, I told you not to move. Elena met his gaze. If I miss that flight, I miss someone important. He rolled his eyes and went, we'll see what my supervisor says. Her voice was quiet. What do you see when you look at me? He tilted his head, puzzled. What I mean it, she said. What do you think I? He didn't answer. She nodded. That's what I thought. For a moment, she wanted to walk away. Just leave the bag, the notebook, the whole thing. Maybe even the flight. It wasn't like her son was expecting her. He'd be just as fine if she didn't show. And if he did care, well, he never said so. A few years back, she tried to talk to someone at the VA. Her knees had started locking up, and the tremors in her hand had gotten worse. The clerk glanced at her papers, frowned, and said, You're not in the system? Did you file properly? Some people think they're eligible when they're not. She never went back. She hadn't worn her dog tags in years. She hadn't told Anthony much of anything. Really. When he was small, she kept her uniforms in boxes in the attic. He thought she'd been a nurse or maybe something like a secretary. He never asked, and she never corrected him. Maybe that had been the beginning of all this. The silence. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The woman 2 spots behind her leaned forward slightly and spoke just above a whisper. Excuse me, the woman said. Her voice was hesitant. Were you really in the service? Elena turned. The woman was in her late 60s, with short white curls and an oversized handbag. She looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure whether to believe it or apologize for asking. Elena nodded once. I was... Oh, the woman said, then looked down at the floor. My husband served too. Korea. But people don't talk about it. They usually don't, Elena replied. The woman started to say something else, but Dylan turned sharply. I need you to step back. Ma, he told her. The woman shrunk into silence and stepped away. Elena looked back at her notebook. The marigold petal had shifted slightly in the draft from a nearby AC vent. The stem was brittle. One crack, and it would fall apart. A voice cut through the static of her thoughts. "Supervisors on their way," Dylan said, almost smug. "Another 10 minutes. Maybe 15. She thought about that flower again. About Reyes. About the kid who'd made her promise not to forget him. She thought about all the people whose NS had faded off official records, or never made it there to begin with, and how many of them had left nothing but notebooks behind. She thought about Anthony, about what she might say to him. If she ever got there, maybe I won't say anything at all, she thought. Maybe I'll just show him the book, and maybe he'll understand what kind of silence she'd been carrying. Elena stood motionless, the notebook still lying flat on the table, the marigold petal trembling in the breeze. Her ID card sat untouched beside it, ignored like a form someone didn't want to file. Dylan Myers leaned back on his heels, arms folded, still pretending this was routine. Then a voice rose from the line behind them. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the static. Clear, older, controlled. "Excuse me, son," the man said, "but do you even know what unit that patch belongs to?" Dylan turned, half annoyed. "Sir, I need you to stay behind. I asked you a question," the man repeated, now stepping forward into the light. He looked to be in his early 60s, wearing a blazer with khaki pants and carrying a leather briefcase tucked under one arm. His wire-rimmed glasses rested low on his nose, and his graying hair was parted with precision, calm as a Sunday school teacher. But his tone, that of someone who'd spent years getting students to stop talking and start listening. He pointed directly at the faded red and gold patch on Elena's bag. "That's the insignia of the 308th Supply Battalion, Quartermaster Corps, served in Desert Storm, attached to the 3rd Armored." Dylan blinked. The man stepped closer, not touching anything, just standing beside Elena now. "I've taught high school history for 30 years, he said, "and I wrote a dissertation on the logistics chain of Operation Desert Storm. That battalion saved lives by the hundreds. They ran medical shipments into unsecured zones. They operated without full combat escort, and they had one of the highest casualty rates of any support unit in the theater." He turned to Dylan, firm. "So maybe before you accuse someone of faking credentials, you learn to read a patch." The terminal had gone quiet. Dylan opened his mouth, closed it, then glanced down at the notebook again. "I'm just doing my job," he muttered. "No," the man said. "You're abusing your authority. There's a difference." Elena didn't speak, not at first, but then she slowly picked up the notebook, turning to a page with a half-folded corner. She laid it flat on the table and pointed to it written in black ink. The letters were small but deliberate. Reyes, H-K-I. Her voice didn't tremble. "This isn't memorabilia. This is a record. I wrote that knee down under a tarp in 38-degree heat, while his blood soaked through the back of my shirt." Dylan stood frozen. Elena looked him straight in the eye. "You don't have to believe me, but you will treat this with respect, because the person behind that knee can't speak for himself." She slid the notebook back into her pack, her movements exact and practiced. The older man beside her nodded slowly. No one should be humiliated for serving their country. The moment held, not loud, but unshakable. From the far side of the checkpoint, a voice called out, clipped and firm. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" A woman approached in a dark TSA uniform, tablet in hand. She moved with authority but not arrogance, scanning the scene as she walked. Her knee tag read, Rivera. Dylan immediately stepped toward her. "Supervisor, I flagged this passenger for suspicious credentials. The ID doesn't look right," and Rivera cut him off with a gesture. "I saw the last 5 minutes on Sarah. I'd like to see the ID myself." Elena held it out. Rivera studied it, then looked at the notebook Elena had half sipped back into her bag. "This your field log?" Elena nodded. "From 91. Iraq." Rivera's eyes softened. "Not dramatically. Just enough. My uncle was 101st Airborne. He made it home, but his best friend didn't. She turned to Dylan. Her voice cooled. This is a valid VA ID, and this situation has been handled poorly. Dylan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just, we'll talk after your shift, Rivera said flatly. She turned to Elena again. You're clear to go. Ma? Sorry for the delay. Elena gave a simple nod. No thanks. No smile. Just a quiet acknowledgement. She slung the backpack over her shoulder with the careful motion she'd used for decades. From behind them, a soft murmur began to rise, just one or two passengers shifting, clearing throats. A middle-aged man in line gave a small nod. A young woman with purple headphones lowered them around her neck and looked at Elena with a kind of quiet regret. Carla, still holding her phone, finally lowered it. Her face had changed, no longer smug, just uncertain. She tapped once on the screen and said softly, deleting it, then shoved the phone into her jacket pocket. A teen boy in a hoodie closed his X app and slipped the phone back into his bag. No one clapped. No one made a speech, but something had changed. Subtle. Enough to breathe easier. The man who had spoken up stepped back, adjusting the strap of his briefcase. I'm Mr. Thompson, he said quietly. Retired teacher. If you ever speak to a classroom, I hope my students are in it. Elena allowed herself the faintest flicker of a smile. Just one breath of warmth in an otherwise cold morning. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, she said. He nodded once, then turned to rejoin the line. Rivera motioned toward the exit corridor. Gate C4 is straight down the hall. You've still got a few minutes. Elena didn't need to be told twice. She walked forward, each step deliberate, her boots tapping a steady rhythm down the terminal floor. Her shoulders didn't slump. Her pace didn't rush. She didn't look behind her. She wasn't walking away from the moment. She was walking through it. Every step said this thing, I was here. I still here. She passed by the line of silent travelers, none of whom spoke, but their silence no longer felt condemning. It felt respectful, even if they didn't know how to say it. And as she disappeared into the corridor toward her gate, the last thing she saw was the blinking departure board Minneapolis. Final boarding. She had just enough time to make it. She didn't feel vindicated. This wasn't a victory, but it wasn't defeat either. It was a return to equilibrium, a reclaimed breath. Her fingers brushed the spine of the notebook through the canvas of her bag, and for the first time that morning, she didn't feel the need to tighten her grip. Elena moved quickly through the corridor, her boots striking the floor with controlled urgency. Gate C4 was just ahead, the final passengers stepping through the jet bridge. Her breath wasn't rushed, but her pulse nudged higher with each stride. At the gate, a woman in a navy blue blazer looked up from the podium. Her expression changed when she saw Elena, eyes lingering on the backpack, on the patch, on the way she walked. She didn't say anything. No apology, no fuss. Just scanned the boarding pass and gave a quiet nod that meant more than words could. Elena stepped onto the plane without looking back. The cabin was half full, filled with the rustle of jackets and the low hum of engines waiting to wake. She found her seat near the back aisle, row 21. It wasn't much, but it was hers for now. She placed the backpack carefully beneath the seat in front of her, then lowered herself into the chair with a soft exhale. The pain in her knees flared, but she ignored it. The adrenaline had started to wear off, leaving a cold fatigue settling into her shoulders. She rested her head against the seat back and closed her eyes just for a moment. Then a soft voice broke through the cabin noise. Hi, it said. Would you like something warm? Elena opened her eyes. A flight attendant stood beside her early 20s. Brunette, kind eyes. The net tag read Leela. She held a paper cup of Stuying tea in both hands, careful not to spill a drop. I saw what happened earlier. Lila said, from the screen in the staff room, that guy was way out of line. Elena straightened a bit but didn't answer. Lila offered the cup gently. It's mint. On the house. Elena hesitated and then took it with a nod. Thanks. Lila lingered a second longer. I don't know if it means anything, but my grandfather served in Vietnam. He didn't talk much about it either. Just thank you, Ma. Elena met her eyes. There was no pity there. Just something genuine. Something small, but real. You take care of yourself, Elena said. Lila smiled and moved on, weaving back toward the galley. As the last passenger settled, Elena reached down to her pack and pulled out the notebook. She didn't open it right away, just held it in her lap, tracing the cracked edge of the leather with her thumb. She felt a pair of eyes watching her. From across the aisle, a boy maybe 7 or 8 sat with his mother. He had headphones around his neck and a juice box in hand, but his gaze was locked on her bag, or maybe the patch. He leaned over the armrest and whispered, "Were you in a war?" Elena looked at him. She saw no mockery in his face. It's just the pure curiosity of someone too young to be afraid of the question. "I was," she said softly. "Did you shoot people?" he asked. His mother's eyes widened. "Tyler." But Elena raised a hand gently. "It's okay." She thought a moment before answering. "No, I didn't shoot. I carried medicine and maps, and sometimes people who couldn't walk anymore." He blinked. "So you were like a helper soldier?" She nodded. "Something like that." The boy grinned. "Cool." Then turned back to his juice box. His mother mouthed, "I'm sorry," but Elena shook her head. "He's fine." The captain's voice crackled overhead, announcing departure. The engines stirred to life. The hum turned into a low rumble, and the plane began its slow crawl away from the gate. Elena opened the notebook. She turned carefully past the earlier pages, skipping over supply runs, lost inventory reports, casualty counts. She flipped to the page where Reyes's NE was written, still in dark, deliberate ink. Below it, there was a small space, blank and clean. She uncapped a pen. Her handwriting wasn't as strong as it used to be. The tremor in her hand had worsened over the years, but the letters see out steady enough. Today, someone remembered you. She set the pen down, looked at the words for a long moment, then reached into the back cover and pulled out the brittle desert marigold. The stem had broken slightly, but the petals still held their shape. Somehow, after all these years. She cupped it in her hand, smiled, just faintly, then placed it back where it belonged, tucked between pages, right beside Reyes's name. No ceremony, no speech, just a small, quiet act. The plane tilted upward as the engines roared to full power. Elena felt the pressure pull her into the seat as the earth fell away beneath them. She looked out the window. Tucson was shrinking lines and shapes becoming soft patches of color. The mountains in the distance held on to the morning haze, and the sky above them opened wide, unbroken. She let herself breathe. For years, she'd carried that notebook like a second spine, rigid, silent, hidden. She never opened it in public, never spoke about what was inside. And every time someone questioned her, doubted her, pushed her aside, she let them, not because she agreed, but because it was easier. Today had been different. She had spoken, not to defend herself, but to defend the Winanis. That changed something. It wasn't redemption. She didn't need that. It wasn't even forgiveness. But it was release. She looked down at the backpack on the floor. The patch was barely visible now, scuffed and faded, almost blending into the canvas. But she saw it clearly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the urge to cover it up. The boy across the aisle had fallen asleep, his head against his mother's arm. The tea had cooled, but she sipped it anyway. Mint. Faintly sweet. Her fingers brushed the notebook once more. Then she slid it gently back into the bag. The cabin lights dimmed. A soft orange glow spilled in from the windows as the sun climbed higher. Elena folded her arms across her chest, then loosened them again, letting one hand rest lightly on the backpack strap. That was enough. She didn't need applause. She didn't need a plaque. She just needed to arrive. And when she did, she would step out of that plane not as a symbol, not as a hashtag, but simply as herself unhidden, unashed. As the plane leveled off above the clouds, Elena leaned her head back and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, and the past didn't weigh on her. It rested.